Hello, everyone. I'm Kashane Denton, and today we are joined by three persons in the fight for migrant workers. We have with us Chris Ramsaru, Moilene Samuels, and Joan Gray. And they are from two different organizations, and I'll allow them to tell you a little bit more about the organizations that they represent. Now, today we'll be having a chat about migrant workers here in Canada, some of the issues that they face, and how we can support them in our own ways. As you know, a part of the JCA is advocacy, and this is us kind of bringing some information to you about what our migrant workers, or farm workers as some of us call them, go through as they come here to work and try to support their families wherever they're from. So I'll turn over to Joan to introduce her organization and tell us a little bit more about Unity Hopeful.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me in this meeting. I was really feel really good when Irma contacted me about this, because I was hoping that, something like this would have happened a long time ago. However, the name of my program is Unity Hopeful. We've been around since 2011, and the main focus of Unity Hopeful is to help the migrant workers to get some winter gears when they come into the country in January, February, and March. This is how we started out, as just collecting winter coats, everything that we wear, they would need as well. And we started out by doing that back in 2011, and we're still doing that. Along the way, we've added a few things to the program because we see that it was so well needed, and so we added a few things like putting on social activities for the workers. I'm sorry, I'm outside in my vehicle. You might hear some vehicles sometimes.
I understand.
So yeah, we added a few things along the years, like social activities for the workers to keep their mind active apart from just working and going to the bank houses, and to keep their sanity. Because with all this, we know that there's mental issues with the workers as well. So some of the social activities that we put on is there's two big social events that we put on every year. One is our Mothers and Fathers Day dinner for the workers that we've been doing for the past 9 years. And they look forward to it. It's more than just a gathering, eating, singing. We do a big raffle, and we raffle for some flat screen TVs and some electronics, and they look forward to it and enjoy that session very much. We also try to do a Christmas dinner for them when they're leaving, the last set that are leaving every year. That one hasn't been too successful, but we're working on it. I think we have only done that twice in the 9 years that I've been running the program. We also offer some mental support for the workers. They called, if they're stressed out and want to talk, and, just to get things out, we try and accommodate them with people. I hook them up with people who can have, degrees that can just mental counsel them as well. So that's pretty much what Unity Hopeful does in a nutshell.
Thank you. Okay, and then we will turn over to Chris and Moilene to give us some background on justice for migrant workers.
Moilene, you want to start off? I guess why you got involved, and then I'll jump in afterwards.
Oh, okay. Good. Yeah, so my name is Moilene. As we were discussing before, I am a child of migrant worker parents as well, back home in Jamaica. And until 4 years ago, I had absolutely no idea about the workers, the migrant workers, after they arrive here, and some of the things that they have to go through, their living conditions, the working on the farm, you know, access to support, for example, medical attention, you know, proper food, cultural food, you know, etc., etc. Um, I was lucky to meet actually Chris's mom. That's how I got involved, and I decided to travel with them on a couple of trips. I have gone on a couple of trips on the farm to Leamington. I've gone to Brantford, not on the farm, but in the farm area. But I've gone to Leamington a couple of times. Well, my first trip there to Leamington sort of you know, opened my eyes, really sort of remind me, as I later mentioned, of uh, slavery, really. For me, the drive, it was a long one on the road to the farm itself, off the main road. And I could see where, you know, I could just tell the houses that belong to the planters and the you know, sort of shack looking dwellings, I call them, that I could tell right off the bat that they belong to the workers. And for me, it was as if I'm driving through the history book, you know, as I mentioned earlier, right? Well, that was just the beginning of, you know, of things to come. A couple of the dinners that Joan mentioned, I went up to attend, and during the dinners, um, we would have discussions with the workers. I sat down with a couple of workers to, you know, to find out how their what their daily work is, you know, what they do on a, you know, daily basis, sort of, and how are their living conditions, how do they get food, if they're getting food, you know, proper cultural food, stuff like that. And you know, that opened my eyes to the realities of life on the farm. I was told that, you know, the toilets in the bunkhouses, the toilets weren't working at times. There wasn't enough toilets, enough showers, enough bathroom access to like basin or water, so place where they could wash their hands and, you know, quickly freshen up. Um, the fridge sometimes didn't work. The stove sometimes didn't work. And we have to remember that these bunk houses can hold up to anywhere from maybe 10 to maybe 20, I would say, 20 or maybe more workers. And these are all grown men, right? So first and foremost, so they would definitely need enough of these facilities, you know, in order for them to, you know, to get up, get ready, and head off to work, because they're always on the go, 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 right? The other thing is, they said food. They weren't able to get cultural food that they're familiar with, food to keep them healthy, you know, for even for their lunch and so on and so forth. They said they were taken to the grocery store, I guess, whichever the grocery store in the community. Um, I believe it was maybe once a month or twice a month, something. And it's whatever this grocery store offers, they would be able to buy, of course. So that's sort of one of the kind of major issue for them there, because as people from the Caribbean and South and Central America, you know, there's certain cultural foods that we need, you know, to keep us healthy, that our bodies are already accustomed to, right? For example, there are like Rastafarian migrant workers that don't eat meat, and, you know, they need a certain kind of vegetables or beans or grains, right, to supplement the meat, to, you know, to keep them healthy, especially during the winter time, or, you know, during the cold weather, that our immune system tend to, you know, to take a dive, and illnesses, or, you know, we're susceptible to illnesses more during those times.
Right.
Yeah, so so after, you know, observing that, and hearing the stories, I came home and I back to Toronto. I returned to Toronto and I started thinking, what can I do? What can I do? How can I help? Right? There must be a way I can help my people here in Canada. So I get more involved. I spoke with Chris and the other members of and Donna and Consuelo, other members of the team, to say, what, I have to do something. I feel really helpless, right? And also, I think maybe why I started, right away feeling that and believing that I can help, there must be a way that I can help. I also work downtown with the vulnerable and marginalized community for almost 30 years as a community service worker, SSW, and also working on my BSW program there. So, I sort of understand needs and, when you're vulnerable or when you're marginalized, you needed support. There's not much that you can do because of your situation. And I felt that's what was happening to my people up, on the farms. They're tied to their farm. They need support. They can't get out to do what they would like to do because of their contracts and and government policies and so on and so forth. So that's what brought me and still have me continue working with TUSIS. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Moilene.
Okay.
Okay, so Chris, do you want to tell us how this all started and how you got involved?
So it was now about 20 years ago. It was in 2001. And there was a wildcat strike in Leamington, Ontario. What that means is basically a group of workers walked off the job, and they were fed up with the conditions that they were facing. And a few of us, I was tasked with putting a group of people together to go down to investigate the conditions. And that was kind of our first foray, being a Toronto person and ignorant about the countryside. I didn't know what I was going to see. And that was definitely one of the most eye-opening experiences in my life. And, it was a group of, at that time, many of us were younger activists, all people of color or racialized people. And over the last 20 years, our organization, we're all volunteer, Justice for Migrant Workers. And we are, there's activists, community people who just care about the community. There are people who are former migrant workers, current migrant workers. We've got a small group of people in Toronto, but we've got contacts and peeps across Southwestern Ontario and in fact across Canada. And the best way to describe our organization, I think people like these kind of glossy technical terminologies to talk about who they are and what they are. But I think about us is two or three things: about building community and ensuring that there is solidarity. What we've seen, I guess, across the board for the Caribbean, the Mexican, the Thai, Filipino, Guatemalan, Honduran workers, is that through a series of laws, the municipal, provincial, and federal laws, they're treated differently. And we try to push boundaries and push the envelope to make sure that they are included and our laws aren't used to try to divide workers and to try to treat them differently as the rest of us. And our concerns stem from a system that we see where workers are tied to one employer. It's a system that many of us believe is based on a plantation economy. It's a system of indentureship. And racism is at the core of why and how this program operates and how it dehumanizes workers. So for us, it's about how to basically try to make sure to fight this injustice. And we use different ways. So we do community dinners. We've done caravans across Ontario to highlight these issues. We have meetings with workers. We engage in different types of protests, putting pressure on the municipal, provincial, and federal governments. And I'll get to the reason why each one of those governments a little bit later. And we've also undertaken different legal actions to put pressure on levels of government for enacting laws that we believe is discriminatory. So it really, it depends on what the situation is. From just building friendship and bonds of support to fighting the larger structure of what we believe the system is based on injustice. That's what we see our role is. There's no clear one particular mandate. It's about responding to what we see as a crisis in our food system, where people who were slaves and indentured people at one time in the Caribbean are working under conditions which are rooted in the past, but just here in the global north.
Okay, awesome. And so what we've seen is that just like myself, and I know we had a little conversation about this earlier, is that a lot of persons don't know what exactly they go through to get here and to stay here, even while they go through all of these injustices, as you said. And so each of you mentioned a few points, and I'm just going to touch on that a little bit, because when Joan introduced hers, and from Moilene speaking as well, and now you, Chris, we hear that the accommodations is a big deal. So tell us a little bit more about that. What is the housing situation like? And either one of you can go.
I'll let Chris will give you a little bit more in-depth information. Yeah.
Oh, you want me to go first, or
Joan,
yes?
Joan, you want to go first?
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay, so over the years, it's been 27 years since my house was open to the migrant workers, and this started out back in Beamsville out on Niagara-on-the-Lake. I was selling into a flea market, shoes, ladies, men, children shoes, and a group of workers walked into the flea market, and they were standing at my stall, and I started to talk to them, and you know, they said they're from Jamaica and they're here on the farm work program. And at that point, it was 1993. I have no idea what this farm working program was about. So as they stand there and we talk and we get used to each other's and we talk where you come from, blah, 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 in Jamaica, we get to know each other and we exchange phone numbers. And one gentleman said to me, if he asked me if I sell a lot of stuff here, and I said, no, I'm just trying this out. You know, I don't know if I'm going to sell or not. And he said, well, if you trust me, I can take you around to the farm houses and you'll make a better money. And so this is how my eyes was opened up to the farm worker. I trust this gentleman. He take me around and he showed me a few of the houses that the guys are, and our business was very good. For 17 years, I did that. I was a salesperson. I sell all kind of stuff. I leave from shoes and I go into ethnic food that the workers want and demand, because they're out there in the rural area and that kind of culture food is not available, as Marlene said. And a lot of people do not understand how the Caribbean people eat, and they don't understand that our food is our strength, you know. And when I said our food is our strength, I mean that rice and peas and chicken, we eat that for breakfast, okay? We eat it for lunch, we eat it for dinner. Our system are built on that kind of system that it doesn't hurt us. And we have to have that food for them to work into the field, and that give them strength. That's what I mean by our food is our strength. So when you are feeding the workers with a different culture food, their system is not used to it and they don't want it, you know. So it's very important that the workers get their culture food. And as what's going on in the pandemic right now is just a big mess and a whole lot of lies that's going on. I have spoken to the workers in, maybe I gone a little bit too far ahead. Sure.
It's okay. We could transition into that. So we could actually talk about how the housing situation is with the pandemic that's going on, and how does that put them at risk, or how are they more exposed to infection or anything else because of this accommodation situation?
Well, what I've seen over the years, dealing with the workers, as far as the housing issue has always been, it's go way back from Chris, about 1966, I believe was the first time Jamaican come to farm working program. It goes way back. It's a big issue with the workers. I've seen overcrowding, you know, I've heard guys complain with so many inside situation that is not right. You have 14 men using one stove and one bathroom. And, you know, it's just not acceptable. And it is a big issue. It has been for years. It still is up to this very moment, the same issue that they're facing, you know. No privacy. You have 14 men in one room or 10 men in one open space, you know, which is mentally draining, really, for the workers. So not only is the worker here and they're working sweat and blood in the greenhouse because they work very hard in the greenhouse. I mean, they sweat. And then they have to come home to this overcrowded issue. And, you know, it's just goes so deep that, you know, Chris would know a lot more about this. But that's what I've been experiencing over the years that I have been dealing with it. The housing issue is very, very bad.
Okay. All right. So Chris, do you want to tell us a little bit about the accommodation situation that you know about, and also tell us.
Sorry.
I thought Ms. Joan was saying something. Sorry. Yeah. And then tell us about, I know Ms. Joan, she kind of leaps into stuff. So she creates like a little transition for us. Tell us about how all of this affects their mental health, right? Because that's an important part of it. And we know that they're out there, they're separated from their family. They're put with people that they might not necessarily know. So they have to build new relationships there. But at the same time, they're working really hard and their support system is not near them. So tell us how that works for them and some of the stories that you've heard, how their mental health is affected.
The most common story, and, you know, men, it's very difficult for a lot of men to break down and to talk about their experiences. And I think each one of us have had that experience where, you know, grown men who pride themselves on being tough farm workers would break down and cry about the situation that they're facing. You know, watching their children grow up from away, being away from their families, you know, seeing their situation back home deteriorate because, you know, the family can't be together and they're here working away to put food on their table, and also not getting the respect that they rightfully deserve, being so-called essential workers in our society. Now, the question about housing, so first, sorry, let me get before the housing part, but, you know, just this, you know, this constant separation, the sadness, but there's also a bond that workers do build amongst themselves, right? A form of solidarity to try to address this, you know, the often brutal conditions, you know, really terrible working and living conditions that they have to face. And I think this bond is one way of trying to resist, you know, these circumstances that they're facing in our backyard here in the fields of Ontario. And one of the things, before we get into the idea about talking about bunkhouses, I want us to focus on power. All right, so the program is based on power. The program is based on control. This is not about getting these cheap workers from the global south. These are workers who are skilled. These are very, very trained farm workers, right, who are the best at what they do. But because of a series of provincial and federal laws and municipal laws that are basically crafted by the employers, right, through the pressure they're able to put on the federal, provincial, and municipal governments, the laws are created to benefit the employers. So in the housing, for instance, when we think about migrant housing, we know that it's overcrowded. We know that conditions are terrible. But why? Why is this happening? And one of the first things that people will tell you, well, the men just don't know how to clean up from themselves, or they like to live in these conditions. That is absolute nonsense. What happens here is that the protections that you have, say, as a resident under the Residential Tenancies Act, as a tenant in Ontario, but across the board, every province and territory across Canada, if you live in an agricultural dwelling, if you live on a farm, if you live in housing provided by your employer, those are exempt from any type of protections. So basically, it's a set of laws that don't apply for people who live in these bunkhouses. So very much anything could happen. So first of all, there's no legal protection, and the employer acts as your immigration officer, your employer, and your landlord at the same time. All right, so that's also critically important. If you're fired, you're also deported and you're evicted. So you could eventually be homeless if you're trying to exert your rights here in Canada, which is not a system that any of us should be accorded to in the 21st century. Forget that 20th century or the 19th century. This is not the conditions anyone who puts food on our table or anyone should be facing here. So that's the first part. The second reason why the housing conditions and why migrant workers are so rife for the pandemic is because these are congregate housing. Because the bunk houses, even the guidelines that exist, they're not enforceable. So there is nothing really that could happen, no oversight. So you've got men and women who are cramped in these conditions. They're giving kids bunk beds in some cases. And, you know, we've been exposing across Ontario. If people go to our website, theharvestingfreedom.org, you're going to see some pictures there. And Moilene, Joan, and myself, we've all received dozens of more of these pictures, which we have not published, right? Of some of the most atrocious conditions. And that's because there is no oversight, there is no protection, and there is no enforcement. The Globe and Mail recently reported, so the municipal government is the one that's supposed to be responsible for the inspections. A lot of times there's inspections that's done at the beginning of the year, but there's nothing that's done across the year. And then these same reports, let me just make sure I have this correct. The municipality now in some areas, depending on where you are, they don't even need to do a physical inspection. If they have pictures or videos, they could use that to get the inspection passed. And what the Globe and Mail just reported was that photos or videos from several years ago was being used to provide and approve accommodations for this year during the pandemic. So the crowded conditions, the absence of sanitation, the bathrooms that don't work, these are all part of a system that's created to build power for the employers at the expense of workers. The other important thing what people don't understand, and using Joan as the example there in the Windsor-Essex area, the production of those vegetables is not for consumption of people here in Ontario. It's for export production. And most of the farms which workers are working on are large production. These are large operations. These are multi-million-dollar operations. And at the end of the day, these employers want to make as much money off of controlling Black and brown workers. So that's why when I keep talking about power, the housing laws, the employment laws, and the immigration laws where workers are tied to an employer and they have to return at the end of the year, these are all crafted to benefit the interests of the industry at the expense of the migrant workers.
Right. And so I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate, as they say, hopefully not really, because I've heard persons with this perception, not that we agree with it, but it's something that people will say even while watching this. If the conditions are so bad, why don't they stop coming? Because we've all heard that. And what do you guys have to say about those statements?
So one of the things, if we're looking at Mexico, for instance, we know that the North American Free Trade Agreement has had a negative impact and have basically destroyed their agricultural industry. And in that case, a lot of those people who were former farm workers have become a farm worker because of these unfair trade agreements. We also have to remember that a lot of the workers here, they have a strong attachment. This is what their jobs are. They've been working at this for decades. We, you know, all three of us have been workers who've been coming up for 10, 20, 30 years. This is their sole form of income. And, you know, at the start of the pandemic, talking to workers in Jamaica and Trinidad and across all the other islands, people were left with a tough choice. Stay home and starve, or come here and try to sacrifice to put food on their table back home. And that's a reality that a lot of workers are facing. And when we keep talking about essential workers, what we have to remember is that the migrant workers, not only are they essential for what they bring for their families back home, but our entire industry, our agriculture industry is premised on their labor. But because of the system that's set up, they're not provided with the overtime pay, the hazard pay, the ability to exert their rights by forming unions. The basic protections that each one of us have, they don't have. So what all of us are trying to say is that if the workers are coming up to Canada, they should be treated fairly and accordingly and be paid as equals as everybody else. And that's what we're trying to say, at least from my side. And I'll let my friends add on to that too. It's about making sure that the conditions here are decent so all of us could basically prosper together.
Right. And so, Moilene, you were going to say, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to add quickly to your question there, Kashane, where I was on another webinar where one of the speaker is the professor from an academy back home in Jamaica where they train. I think where they train the workers, or they're affiliated with the migrant workers before they arrive in Canada. and she did some work or some interviews with some migrant workers, and my understanding from her comment is that the workers doesn't seem to be complaining that much, because as per what she says, one lady said, oh, she was very proud and very happy with going abroad, going to foreign to work, because it helped her to support her kids and help them to go to university. Sure that, you know, if she should really sit down with that lady aside and really get her to open up and tell the whole story, the whole truth, not just the part where yes she was able to make money. Well, that's the truth. She was, from whatever payment she got, right? She was able to, right? But there are other hardship, you know, there are other pieces to that story, right? You know, you see. So yeah, I mean, so farm work is not farm working is hard work, and the payment for, okay, she was able to make it because she decided to, right? Not because they're, you know, she was paid reasonable or that the payment was great. You know, she decided to. I'm pretty sure she had was to save, put aside, you know, some money from the little that she was getting to help her kids, you know. But there's much more to farm work and you know, and working here on the farms in Canada.
Right. And so thank you for that, Moilene. And I know we spoke about a little bit before we actually started recording, when we say like the perception of what it is like when persons come here is you're traveling, you get to see the world and work. Like that sounds like a win-win situation, right? You're earning foreign currency and spending it in countries where, you know, the exchange rate is in your favor with that currency. And so you should be grateful, right? But then they do it, like Chris said, because they have no choice. They have to feed their families, and there's not much going. And so we'll go into some of the mental health supports that are available for them, because like you said, they're not afforded the same care as we as Canadian residents are. What exactly is available to them in the way of healthcare? So not just mental health, but medical care and just all around wellness. Like you and I can walk into a clinic, show our card, or a hospital and get treatment, but what is there for them? And whoever wants to go first is
fine. Chrissy can go, and then I'll come in after.
Okay, Joan, do you want anything to say first, or?
For the mental perspective of it, the healthcare for the workers. Just a few days ago, I was speaking to some workers, and they're not classified as under the migrant worker. They are skilled workers, but they also operate as more or less like farm workers, but they're skilled workers. You know what I'm talking about, Chris. So there's a little bit different there. And this gentleman had a toothache, and he called me and he said he was looking for a dentist to go to. If I have any suggestion, was for him to go to a dentist because his tooth was killing him, you know. And he wanted me to recommend a dentist, and so I did. But he would have to pay like $250 to take his tooth out. And this is his money. It's coming out of his pocket. There's no compensation for these skilled workers to get any reimbursement of any money back when it comes on to dental care. Whereas the migrant workers, I do believe now they'll get their money back, part of their money, with a certain insurance that was taken out for them recently. So, you know, the workers mentally, they go through, these skilled workers, they're entitled to health care, so they have the OIP, and that part of it is fine. But if they have something like a toothache, where they have to pay out of their pocket, remember some of these workers are coming from Jamaica, they have several children, you know, they have 5, 6 children, you know, that they have to look after. And then mother and father is looking to them as well, you know. So it's really a mental stress for them. And, you know, they're here, they're only making minimum wage, and they're not entitled to what we are entitled to fully. So just that alone is a mental stress for them, you know. It's very hard on the workers.
No, for sure.
Cool. So I'm going to try to not be complicated. I think I do that too often. Sometimes I think people scratch their heads when I talk. So the first issue is, I guess I'm going to talk pre-pandemic. So the actual issue of getting to the hospital or doctor, right? Just the isolation and alienation. So if you're in a place like Chatham, Kent, or Niagara, or if you're way outside of Leamington, actually getting to go see a doctor, you're dependent on the employer driving you. So that's very, very difficult. So first of all, access to healthcare, number one. Number two, and why I keep talking about this idea of temporary, this idea of being treated less than human. As we know that there's been a lot of talk about race and healthcare and the way that Black people, but all racialized people have been treated very different by our healthcare system. That is no different in rural Ontario, where very much this idea of migrant workers not being seen as equals is played out in every aspect, not only on the workplace, but access to services, including healthcare. So when you go into a hospital, it's very much you're going to be, you're thought as you know, the employer's responsibility. So the ability to have actual equal access to healthcare based on race is a huge problem, and it's been going on for decades. So those are the first two parts: the access to healthcare because of transportation and isolation, and also the question, and for me, it's always about race and how race and connected with their status as temporary migrant workers. Now, right now is crisis time for us, and what I mean by this is we're going to see a lot of workers who are sick and injured, and it's as it's time for the harvest season to end. This is where a lot of the injuries happen. So many workers who are sick and injured, rather than receiving full health care here in Ontario, they're being sent home. We're currently trying to organize and show support for a worker who's really sick. And we're trying to make sure and go through the different steps in case if they try to medically repatriate him. And so that's a lot of our work's being done to try to see how do we try to prevent that from happening. When workers are injured and sick, they're supposed to have access to workers' compensation. When people are injured or sick as a result of work, they're supposed to have access to workers' compensation. And what we see a lot of times is that workers are sent back home to Mexico or to Trinidad or to Jamaica, and their ability to exert and access these benefits is almost impossible. And we see what we're doing in effect is downloading our healthcare system onto the countries of the global south by basically sending people home to get more sick and in many cases die. Now, as a result of the pandemic and as a result of people pushing for different changes, currently in the province of Ontario, and this is not just for rural Ontario, but this is for all your viewers. If you got friends who are tourists, who are undocumented right now, access to healthcare at the hospitals are free for both COVID and non-COVID related issues. So a lot of our friends who are activists in the healthcare scene are the ones who push for these type of changes. What we've been doing with many people on the ground has been trying to push the hospitals in the different areas. So Windsor, Essex, we received words of workers going in and have to pay for services. So we did some exposés to try to put pressure on them to make sure that doesn't happen. And now across Ontario, different hospitals are coming out with public statements showing that their services are free for everybody, irrespective of what their status are. So I think right now this is a critical point for that. But post-pandemic, the structure remains. Once that work permit ends, once that valid work permit that enables you to work in Canada ends, then you lose your health care. So you're put in a catch-22. If you're trying to seek justice here in Canada and you want to fight against a case of racism or to try to make sure that you have justice for your workers' compensation claim, you're not going to have access to social benefits, whether it's employment insurance or health care. So that's why a lot of people are being sent home because there's no support here post their permit period.
Thank you. Moilene, you want to jump in?
Yes, there's down in Toronto here, there's 3 hospitals. I just want to put it out there. There are 3 hospitals that will see workers or undocumented peoples. and that's St. Joe's in the west, St. Mike's, and East General. So if you know, as I said, I just want to put it out there, or if you know of any undocumented or any farm workers that may require you know, medical attention or medical needs, and are scared to go to hospitals, those hospitals are that they will accept them free. They won't charge, free of charge.
Thank you. A question that I have is now that the pandemic has put kind of a pause on travel and there are restrictions to certain countries, how has that affected persons who may have been at a point where they needed to get back home during this time, and what supports were or are available to those persons up until they got a repatriation flight?
Who wants this?
Joan, you wanna jump in, or maybe Chris, if you wanna.
I haven't heard of anyone that was affected in that area where they could not go home.
Okay,
I haven't heard of that condition at all.
that's good news.
So I've actually heard a few workers who are supposed to go home for their holiday, and they're being told that they have to pay, upon return to Canada, they have to pay thousands of dollars to quarantine out of their own pocket. So this is happening, I guess, in one farm in Southwest Ontario. So maybe let's go back for a little bit during the pandemic. So we had migrant workers who arrived before the pandemic, but when the Canadian border was closed, and then Canada said that only essential workers would be able to enter the country. And at that point in time, the employers had lobbied, and they went to both, they did political lobbying, they took to the media airwaves, they basically went full force to try to get an exemption so migrant farm workers could come up to Canada. Many of us at that point were like, hold on for a second, wait. Before the workers come to Canada, what steps are you going to take to provide protections for the workers? We said about the absence of social distancing. We said about the unequal access to healthcare, the unequal access to occupational health and safety and employment standards protections, the fact that their housing is not sufficient. What steps will you take to address these issues? And the province and the federal government, they basically didn't listen to any of us. And then the pandemic hit. And I believe in the Windsor, Essex, it's over 1,000 people. I think the last count I had was about 1,400 to 1,500 workers across Ontario that we know of that have had the virus. 3 people have died so far. And so basically the opportunity to come to Canada, and many of the workers from Trinidad and Jamaica, I don't know from Mexico, I don't think from Mexico, but the Trinidadians and Jamaican workers were forced to sign a waiver saying that they would not hold their governments accountable or liable if they got COVID here in Canada. And so this was, I guess, one significant problem, definitely that we had a problem with. But it was just the fact that there was no workers' representation, and meaning the voices of workers were left out. The fact that these workers had concerns, they wanted to come to Canada, but they're like, look, we want to make sure that things are proper, right? Things are put in place. And to date, irrespective of the media rhetoric and what we're seeing from our provincial federal politicians, that is not the case as we prepare for the second wave of the pandemic.
Wow. And that in itself says a lot. And so we've spoken about their accommodation, their mental health supports, and other wellness issues, and their meals. So now that we know that our migrant workers are going through this, if there's anyone watching or persons who want to share this information, what can we do to get involved, to support them, to aid the fight for justice, as you put it, and also to support them where they are, whether it be helping them get access to the things they need? What can we do?
Well, I'd like to say, sorry.
Okay, Joan, you go ahead. I can go after. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'd like to say something about that. How can you help? Just an experience that I went through about a month, 6 weeks ago, in regards to the workers that was in quarantine, in regards to their food. I had my program, part of my program is we supply free meals to the workers in condition like this. And I had cooked some meals and I bring it to the hotel to give it to the workers. And it was not accepted um, because I was accused of cooking in my kitchen. I was accused of bringing in viruses. You name it, I was accused of all those stuff. Now, these people that was accusing me, they have no idea who I was. You know, they just assume that I'm just somebody cooking meals and bring it in. And I spoke to several of the workers that was in quarantine, and they were saying to me that we're hungry because what we're getting to eat for breakfast, and then we have to wait 4 hours to get for lunch. We're hungry. And then we gotta wait another 4 to 4.5 hours to get dinner. We're hungry. A gentleman said to me that I weigh 260, 70 pounds, and to give me a juice box and a small piece of chicken and some vegetable, to give me some pasta and sauce. That's not our food. That's not our culture. You know, that's not what we used to. That cannot keep us. And so this is why, you know, I had tried to help out. Um, a lot of stuff that's going on, that is going on in the media and what's been said is not true. And you will only get the truth when you actually speak to the worker in a one-on-one and the phone. You know, that's where you're gonna get the truth, because a lot of things has been sugar-coated out there in the media to make it look like it's good, but it's not good. These workers are suffering in the hotel. They need their culture food. And I want to find out if there's a way, there's a lot of Black businesses. There's restaurant, there's catering services in the Windsor, Essex area with that are Black businesses and Black catering services that can prepare these workers food. They need to be having their own ethnic food. It's bad enough that you have to be stuck inside of a hotel for 14 days and you're worrying about if you have this disease, are you going to catch this disease? And if you're going to die from it, and then you have your family on the other hand, not, not getting any money. And then you have the disrespect. There's so much that goes on that, you know, the disrespect of security guard who are disrespecting you. There's so much that going through the workers' mind. They're mentally drained. They can't wait to get out of there, you know, and then you're not getting your culture food. You're hungry. There's just a whole bag of things that wrapped up in a small little package for these workers. It's mentally draining for them, you know.
Right. Yeah. And it's
Um,
a lot to deal with while also focusing on the fact that, you know, you still have to go back to work right after. So you need all that going on. Moilene, you were coming in?
yes, I just want to add how help, what would help, in my opinion, the community, the workers, is awareness, a community awareness. Because as I mentioned earlier, a good portion, a good number of our Caribbean people here in Canada have absolutely no knowledge that you know, the farm workers are or just a couple of hours away from them, or that farm workers are even here. They're sometimes their families, right? Their families are here and they don't even know, because the workers aren't probably able to buy, you know, buy a phone, maybe to turn around. Um, they don't have access. They may have a phone, but they may not have access to internet to do WhatsApp, which is you know, free now for everyone. um, you know, sometimes by the time they are connected to their families, you know, it's time for them to leave again. So so awareness, community awareness, is one. If all the medias, including G98, if they could, I don't know, run maybe a program or something, mention, you know, sort of ever so often mention the farm workers in you know, on the farms, reach out to them, as we would say, give them a shout out, to recognize them, to so the community, you know, could appreciate them, keep them in their prayers, stuff like that. One request, if I have one of my members, the senior member as well, founding member, she from the Spanish speaking community, she was interested in doing a show as well on G98. I'm not sure, Shane, if that's something that it was Adoma who had arranged that, if that's something that could be arranged. You know, just community awareness. I believe that the more the community is aware of, you know, the inequalities, the injustices, the abuse, the racism, this, you know, the whole, you know, the daily abuses that they have to go to, the derogatory names that they're called, you know, racist remarks, you know, that, you know, just on a daily basis, things that they have to endure. So if you know, if the community could be more aware, you know, to support them, that would be, I believe that would be a good idea.
Thank you. And Chris?
Yeah, there's a couple things. So first, everything that we're seeing on the farms right now, where workers are subjected to deplorable food, where workers are told they cannot leave their property and they're signing away their rights, where money is being, basically wage theft is happening, where they're being deducting all these wages for groceries and other stuff during the quarantine, which is basically, it's theft. It's theft of the workers' wages. All this stuff should outrage everybody. This is the way that no human being should be treated whatsoever. So there's three things I think that we're trying to do. We've organized several caravans. So the next caravan that we're doing to Windsor, Essex is on September 6th, this upcoming Sunday. And what these caravans are is we're getting people to go from different parts of Ontario and to try to go to the communities. Now, we can't, of course, go on the farms if it's the workers, but at least to go to try to some form of support and solidarity and to let them know that the community does care about them. So that's the first thing. Second of all, people have been organizing different food drives to show support. So in the Windsor, Essex area, people have been getting different types of food to try to bring to the workers. And when they've been facing resistance from some of the hotels, the same people, the community members have been pushing back to put pressure on the hotels to accept the donations from the community. The third thing is that people think just because migrant workers are vulnerable because of the structure of the program, that they've got no allies, they have no friends, and they could treat them however they want to in Canada. And I think the challenge and the task for us is to say that is not true. Right, that, you know, the Caribbean community, the Jamaican community in particular, is very strong. Yeah. It's very vibrant, and the voices are needed to put pressure on all three levels of government. Well, why do we say all three levels of government? Because each jurisdiction is responsible for the program, and so the housing, once again, is the municipality, or say the city of Windsor, Essex, or Leamington, or Simcoe, or Tillsonburg. The healthcare, the working conditions are the responsibility of the province of Ontario, Doug Ford, and the federal government around the employment insurance and immigration. So the ability to work in Canada is based on the federal government, which is Justin Trudeau. So rather than give them the luxury of pointing fingers at each other and playing the blame game, we're saying we're going to hold all three of you to account. So once again, go to our website, harvestingfreedom.org, or you could just check in with JCA, and we're going to give you all the information to share with people. On Labor Day, we've got a digital day of action. We're putting pressure on all the different political leaders across the Canada at the municipal, provincial, and federal level to say that, you know, 54 years of injustice is enough. And it's time that we take steps to provide migrant workers with permanent status on arrival, to ensure that their working conditions are equal, and that we say we must end this injustice of disgusting, despicable housing. And this only happens when we hold all three levels of this government together.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
And so this is an interesting conversation, and you know, there's so much more. We could go on for a while talking about it, because I can tell that you guys are all very passionate about this. And I mean, you must be, because some of the things that you've accounted, that you've seen firsthand, can be disturbing. And so I want to say thank you so much for joining us and the JCA for this chat today. Kind of just it's probably just the top of the iceberg, but it does give some context to what you are fighting for and how other persons can help. And just to recap for those of you who are watching, some of the things that you can do. So the first thing is to spread awareness, because if people are not aware, then they can't help. The second thing is to participate. So Chris mentioned his care event on September 6th, his digital day of action on Labor Day, and they have various food drives. Like he said, if you don't know who to get in contact with, you can visit their website or reach out to the JCA. We'll forward the information to you. And of course, become allies for the migrant workers because they need people in their corner. And so Moilene, Chris, and Joan, thank you so much for taking the time to sit with us today. And we hope to see you again soon, and maybe even do this live for all the persons who may also have questions for you that I may not have asked or they may not have gotten the full answer to today. But if you are okay, like they said, you are free to reach out to them and we can pass the information on. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank
You so much, Kashane, for having us on. Take care. Talk soon. Bye-bye.